come near to you to judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers and against the adulterers and against false swearers and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right. And fear not me, saith the Lord of hosts. For I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. The presentation of the messenger is going to clear the way, and then you have the coming of the Messiah. This is one of those passages that would have been a little bit confusing to the individual who is anticipating that all of these things are happening at one coming. Because we have a statement of the fact that he is going to come suddenly to his temple with the messenger preceding the way, and we know that the messenger is John the Baptist, and so he suddenly came to his temple. That is a past event. But then he says, Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts, but who may abide the day of his coming? And we know now that that's talking about the second coming. But in my job, I'm often looking at the mountains, and sometimes it's difficult to tell which one's here and which one's there and which one's back there until you can get a little bit of perspective. And one of those situations happened today, trying to pick out defining things, that you can tell what direction you're looking at. And it's like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, I know where that mountain is. Look right over there. Okay, then this is here and this is here, and still couldn't see what we were looking for. But there were signs that help guide you to help you know what you're looking for. And that's what is being laid out for us here in Malachi. You ask the question, where is the God of judgment? And you are asking some difficult questions similar to Job. Where is God when? And these types of things. And the answer isn't anything that they had anticipated. The answer is found in the Messiah. Now, there's a footnote here. If the Messiah is coming, there is an unwritten statement that the priests were not successful as ambassadors of God. There's also another footnote that the prophets were rejected as the ambassadors of God. And so I have sent messengers that were supposed to turn your hearts to me, and it didn't matter if it was the priesthood, and it didn't matter if it was the prophets you continually rejected. That's why when Jesus comes, several of his parables are about, my father had a vineyard, and so I sent these people, and they beat him up and threw him out, and sent these people, and they killed him. And he said, well, certainly they'll respect the Son. Same type of illusion that's going on here. He's kind of laying the groundwork for that. I'm going to send someone who is going to have a very special messenger that's going to prepare the way. When we were talking in early John about this phrase, it means the removal of all the obstacles that are hindering the coming of a king. So if the king was going to travel to a town, they would send someone on ahead, and they'd make sure trees, rocks, everything were out of the path so that it was the smoothest being able to come. In other words, what he's telling them is the nation of Israel is not ready for the coming of the Messiah. You have folks that are claiming to love him, and you have priests that are sacrificing in the temple, but he's saying, you're not ready. I'm going to have to send a messenger, and he's going to have to clear some of the junk out of the way and smooth the way for the coming of the Messiah so that hearts will be prepared. And then we see the phrase, shall suddenly come. If you were told that company was coming, you would want to get ready. But usually when you're told that company's coming, you're kind of told a date and an approximate time that company is coming. Basically, he's saying you need to prepare for his company, but you don't know when company's coming. And so the idea is it's very important that you get ready and that you stay ready, because he is suddenly going to appear at his temple. In John chapter 1, verses 19 through 23, we have the testimony of John the Baptist that he is the messenger. And then in chapter 2, verses 13 through 19, we have the Messiah suddenly appears in the temple and drastically and dramatically cleanses it, making a statement. Answers the question, where is God when? because it says, the Lord whom ye seek. Now, it's interesting because for those that are looking for the Lord, some of them are looking for a Messiah, and some of them are just looking for a great kingdom in the nation of Israel. But either way, the one that you seek, the messenger, the Messiah, is going to show up at, and it doesn't say the temple, it says his temple, a statement of divinity. And then you tie in all the study that we have been doing through the book of John, where Jesus is telling them, I and my Father are one. You want to know why I healed on the Sabbath? Because my Father works on the Sabbath, and I work on the Sabbath. And, oh, well, why don't you pay your temple tax? And he pays his temple tax, but he lets them know, it's kind of redundant, that I'm paying myself. Now, all of these situations where he identifies with being the one that the temple is for, and that the one that all of the worship and stuff is designed to be, it is also pulled into this. But then a very unique name here, and a wonderful name is given here, even the messenger of the covenant. In other words, the one messenger to fulfill all of the covenants. I did a quick study this afternoon and just looked up a few because it's the same covenant, but it's given in different ways to different folks. Eve in Genesis 3:15 was told that she was going to have a son, and all nations of the world is going to be blessed in her. That was reiterated again to Shem in chapter 9, verse 27 of Genesis. And then we have what's known as the Abrahamic covenant in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. It's reiterated again to Moses in Exodus chapter 6, verses 2 through 8. It's reaffirmed to David in 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 19. And then in Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 34, it's given to the broad nation as a whole who has departed from God and is dealing with great suffering and great punishment, trying to turn them back. And a reminder that, wait a second, I am still working and dealing with you, even though it doesn't look like it. And then we have the phrase, whom ye delight in. Again, a lot of them just expecting the glory days of Israel. I think that's one of the reasons why the disciples were so caught up in that fact, who's going to sit in the right hand and the left hand, because for years now, that's what they are anticipating. When the Messiah comes, he's going to, the nation of Israel is going to be grand and glorious. They couldn't understand that there would be two different comings, that the first time he was going to be merciful, and the second time he was going to be dealing in judgment. Then you look at verse 2, and there is a very careful consideration here for those people who have been asking this question of God. Where is the God of judgment? Because it sure doesn't seem like he's active today. And the question reminds us of what judgment really is and how much he hates sin. But who may abide the day of his coming, and who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire and like a fuller's soap. He is talking about the two comings here. The first one is the Messiah, the second one coming in judgment. And he uses two phrases to describe this answer to where is the God of judgment. Now, both of them are in a negative connotation. Who may abide and who shall stand? And the rhetorical answer here is no one. And so you have these folks that are looking around and they're saying, man, there is a lot of wickedness going on in the world. I don't understand why God doesn't judge it. And his answer is, if I were to come right now and judge, who would be able to stand? No one. No one. Sometimes it's easy to wish away, I guess you will, mercy, love, and grace, and want to rain down fire from heaven if you're already in the position where you have experienced mercy, love, and grace in your own life. But if you're the one who's in a situation where the raining down the fire might come, then you can be really thankful for the patience and the long suffering of the Lord, who waits on the mercy, love, and deals with us kindly even though we don't deserve it. Zechariah chapter 13 verses, I'm going to turn there real quickly and read this to you. there are some shocking statements that happen from time to time in God's Word. And if you're not studying the book of Revelation, sometimes it's easy to not really get the whole picture and think about it in this way. But in Zechariah chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, it says, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God." So when he shows up in judgment, if you could divide the nation of Israel into 3 pieces of pie, and then think about the fact that 2 of them are eradicated, that doesn't, it's a reminder to us that the broad way leads to destruction and the narrow way is the way to heaven. Because you'd think that 2/3 of a nation being wiped out and only 1/3 of them being refined. And yet, if you think about the phrase that's used here, the remaining part is refined in fire. In other words, it is drastically changed. He's not saying that when I look at the nation of Israel, 2/3 of the nation get destroyed. They're the unsaved in separating the sheep and the goats, the dross and the precious metal. And the other part is perfect the way they are. That's not the case. When he shows up, there's no one that's ready. There still is refining that has to happen. And that's kind of a pretty stern warning, if you will. Adults in my life used to say, be careful what you wish for. Because sometimes you don't have the whole picture and you don't know everything, but you think you do, and so you really badly want such and such and such and such to happen, and then sometimes later in your life you realize, man, that was close. I am glad that God didn't answer that prayer, because that definitely wasn't the best thing for me. He uses 2 illustrations here along with these 2 phrases, and what's interesting is even though he brings up 2 illustrations, he's only going to go into the detail of the one in the 3rd verse because they're both the same. You have the refiner's fire and the fuller's soap, and both of these examples are separating the good from the bad, and both of them are examples by immersion and intense cleansing. If it's a metal, you're going to cook it down to its melting point and fundamentally change what it is and get rid of the other. And if it's dirty clothes, you're going to throw lye soap in there, and it's going to drastically go to work and get rid of everything that's unacceptable on the clothing. Both of them are strong pictures. But in verse 3, he's just going to focus on the refiner. And I like the language here because it's pretty intense. It doesn't seem so in the English, but it certainly does in the Hebrew. And it shall come to pass, I got to get back to, no wonder it didn't look right. He's supposed to be sitting, not passing. Here we go. And he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. This is a great picture that they would have been very familiar with. You could go and watch an artisan do this. But sit means that he is totally focused on the task at hand. If you are waiting to melt something, you can throw metal in there and start it heating up, and you have a few minutes before it's going to reach its melting point and its liquid stage. And so if you're like most of us, you'd probably be running around doing something else. You bake a cake, you throw it in the oven, you set the timer for however many minutes, and then you go and do something else until the timer beep, 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 beeps. Not this picture. There is no distraction going on while the cake is in the oven or while the metal is in the cook. He is literally sitting there totally focused on the task at hand. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're going to ask the question, where is the God of judgment? And he answers by saying, when he comes, you're not going to be able to abide him and you're not going to be able to stand. Think of a wave. You go out in the ocean and a wave hits you and it kind of knocks you off your balance. You're like, wow, that was a... But if you go out in the ocean and one of them plows you and tumbles you over and over and over and over, you all of a sudden realize the insignificance of your ability in front of such power. And then he goes right into verse 3 and he says, and by the way, the refiner is sitting there peering into the metal while it is being cooked, while it is being melted down. If you have something that you can't abide in among and you can't stand in the presence of, and that person is standing there staring at you intently during a time of judgment, I'm thinking, you might not want to take that so lightly. But the other thing that this tells me is he sits as a refiner and purifier of silver. You know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say he sits as a remover of dross. And I like that. Because the focus of the refining and the focus of the difficulty, the whole goal is focused on the pure and valuable metal. It is the focus of his work. The junk is removed and it's absolutely insignificant. All you know about the junk is simply that the metal is being refined. That's all he talks about, because the junk's worthless. It's getting thrown away. Multiple commentaries mentioned the dramatic moment in refining silver when the metal becomes a liquid mirror in which you can see your image. And that's the moment when the most dross has been removed and it's as pure as it's going to get. It might be murky while things are developing, but when the clearness comes to the top and you've already gotten rid of most, the other heavier stuff is going to settle out to the bottom so that you can pour off the pure metal, and all of a sudden, and you could see your face in it. 1 Corinthians 15:49 says, for surely we have borne the image of the earthly, and we must also bear the image of the heavenly. And 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, I am supposed to look like him. And I don't look like that now, so there's still some refining that has to go on. But he continues a little bit farther, and he says, they shall start with the sons of Levi. That's the same group that the charges were laid against in chapter 1, verse 6, all the way through chapter 2 and verse 9. I have somewhat against you. You are the ones who are responsible for leading in worship, and yet you're accepting these awful animals, and you are polluting worship. And when I come as a refiner, I'm going to start with the sons of Levi, the ones who are responsible for the leaders in the church, in worship, in godliness. The result, offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. If an offering is going to be acceptable, then two things have to be true. The condition of the offering has to be acceptable, and the focus is the righteousness of the offerer. See, the problem with Cain and Abel is one of them brought the right sacrifice, but he also had the right attitude about it. And the other one didn't bring the right sacrifice, and he didn't have the right attitude about it. So while both conditions were right for this one, both conditions were not right for this one over here. Sincere and consecrated, because they are justified, not self-righteous and not symbolic. You have these guys who are going through the motions and they're offering their offerings, but they certainly aren't doing it in righteousness. And then look at verse 4. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto the Lord, as in the days of old and as in former years. This is one of the ways that we know that he's not talking about the first coming, because it's pretty shortly after that that the sacrificial offering system stops, and it certainly wasn't what it was supposed to be, or he wouldn't have had to cleanse the temple twice, right? I mean, we know there were issues at the time of Christ because they are rejecting him. But a pleasant offering is one that's not offensive. There's no fake worship, and in this day and place, and also worship. I'm going to worship Baal, but I'm also going to worship God because I want to make sure that I got all my bases covered. And you see that Paul, when he goes up to, and I forgot the name of it, Mars Hill. Worship this one, and here's a statue to the unknown God because we don't want to miss anybody. The nation of Israel oftentimes had that attitude. Oh, we're going to worship God because we're supposed to be God's chosen people, but we're going to have that and also worship where we worship this guy and this guy and this guy and also this guy over here. None of that in an offering that is acceptable. And not with other gods, but in the spirit and in truth. What about the former times? Well, Abel's offering. Didn't Abel's offering bring great pleasure to God? Absolutely. And Noah, when he gets off the ark after the flood, it says there was a sweet savor in the Lord's nostrils. And Aaron was told to prepare the fire and get ready a sacrifice. And he gets ready the first sacrifice. And he doesn't light the fire. God rains down fire from heaven on the first sacrifice that Aaron's going to offer. It's interesting to me that Aaron didn't provide anything there. He just did exactly what God was told. And then he rained down the fire, which kind of reminds us of Elijah. Because you have folks running around worshiping Baal, and obviously it was the popular thing to do, and obviously government was promoting it, and all of those things, and yet there is Elijah standing for righteousness and making his standing. God rains down fire, licks up the altar, the wood, the water, the everything. And then David's sacrifice, where David offers a sacrifice and the angel dances on it, swirls and heads up to heaven. All of these offerings were a sweet savor in the nostrils of God and acceptable to him. And that's what he longs for. He longs for acceptable worship. Verse 5. Boy, you talk about calling it like it is. A withering witness here. And I will come near to you to judgment. Okay, you ask the question, where is the God of judgment? And he answers and says, I am going to come very near to you. Well, if he's a refiner's fire, how hot's it going to be, was my thought. I don't know if you've ever been close to anything really hot, but if you've ever felt any heat from a steel furnace, I have never actually been in the building. I've been a couple hundred yards away from one, and they opened the doors, and I thought I was melting. I cannot imagine how hot it is in that building when they pour the steel. It's hard to imagine. Or in a glass blowing furnace, or in a glass melting furnace. My uncle worked for Pittsburgh Plate Glass, and they'd pour glass out of that thing. One day when they shut it down, he took me in there and took me on a tour of the facility. I'm just going to tell you, they'd been shut down for like 2 hours, and he kept saying, don't touch anything, don't touch anything, just look, because it was hot, hot, hot. I mean, the stuff that they were handling it with it was hot. And here's the refiner saying, you want to know where the God of judgment is? I am coming near to you. Reminds me of those guys tossing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace. That thing was heated up 10 times, and you wonder how the furnace stood it. They opened the doors, and the mighty guys dropped dead. How close do you want to be standing to the Lord of judgment when you've asked him, where's the God of judgment? And he says, hold on a minute now, brother, because I'm coming near you. And when I come, I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers. I looked up this word swift because I thought, well, does it mean he's not going to delay judgment? That's not really what he means. Yeah, there's speed involved, but the word literally means liquid, quick, and easy flowing. You pour water out on the floor and it finds every crack and crevice. There is nothing that is not revealed or undiscovered. And that's what it's talking about here. He is going to root out and expose everything. So here you are, you're griping before the Lord and you're saying, I'd like to know where the Lord of judgment is. And he says, oh, I'm going to come really near to you. And when I come, I will be a swift witness and I will reveal everything for what it is as I see it. Not the way you think it is or the way you promote it to other people, but the way I see it. In other words, all the evidence of rot. And look at what he lists out here. Because he's talked about false worship and he's talked about intermarrying with idolatrous folks. But that's not really on the list here. He starts out and he says, sorcerers. Okay, you're supposed to die for that. Adulterers, not just marrying somebody involved in idolatry. In Jewish law, you're supposed to die for that. False witness, whether it's perjury or lying, okay? You can be taken outside the city and stoned for that. Exploiting the poor, cheating on wages. See, they're standing here self-righteously before God, and they're claiming that they love him and that they're offering these sacrifices, and why don't you accept our half-dead animal as a sacrifice? And he's saying, that isn't the half of it. Y'all are full of sorcerers, adulterers, false witnesses, exploiting the poor, and cheating on wages. And when I come, I'm revealing every bit of it. Every single bit of it. And then he closes with one of those, mercurochrome or methylate. Which one's the one that stings like crazy? I think it's methylate, right? Mercurochrome was a good stuff. We had both of them in our house, and 95.5% of the time, it seemed like methylate was the one that always came out. This is going to sting a little. Look at what he says. For I am the Lord. My mom used to say it this way. Who do you think you're talking to? You ever heard that from your parents? Who do you think you're talking to? That's basically what he's saying. You want to know what I'm going to do and where I am, and you think that this is okay. Let me tell you, the answer is a two-part answer. And the first one is going to come in the form of the Messiah's first coming, and then it's going to come in the form of the Messiah's second coming. And if you don't respond to the first coming, you don't want to be standing before me at the second coming, because you can't abide it and you can't stand there. And I'm going to be revealing all this stuff, and I just want you to know before we move on, I am the Jehovah, Lord, all caps. Who in the world do you think you're talking to? I am not to be questioned. Statement of character follows it. I change not. Well, how? Not in the way I view sin, and not in the way I judge sin. So if I'm not judging it as fast as you would like me to, it's not because I was judging it harsher 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. I am treating sin the same way. I do not view sin any differently now than I did at the creation of man in the garden, and I am not judging it any differently. But reminder of how merciful he is. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob, you are not consumed. While Israel constantly broke the covenant, God never did and never does. Because if he did, they wouldn't even be here. So before you stand there and want to call down fire and brimstone on somebody, just remember, God didn't deal with you that way. He was patient in calling you to repentance and accepting the first coming so that you can stand in the second coming, knowing that your sin has been dealt with. And you have been redeemed, justified, and sanctified. Praises or prayer requests tonight?